Hey everybody. In order to continue on with the assignment that we started today in class and are going to have a chance to finish up on Friday in class, plus do what we need to do for the how a bill becomes a law, I'm going to go ahead and send this PowerPoint out. Okay, so we'll not be going over this in class. So here it is. We'll be doing something tomorrow to follow this up after we're done with our assignment that we started today. If you want to pause for a second and grab your study guide that I gave you in class today, you can turn to Objective 4. And if you look at number 1, there's a lot of questions and answers. We're going to go through and answer a lot of those questions in this PowerPoint. So if you want to have that out, you can follow along and answer as we go. And get that most of that finished up. The last question on the Objective 4 we'll do in a future PowerPoint. So if you want to hold off on doing that, or you can try and go ahead and do it now, but it's not going to be in this PowerPoint. Okay. All right. So here we go. We're talking about how a bill becomes a law. First up, who can draft a bill? All right. So drafting of a bill means creating a bill and submitting it to Congress. Right. So first off, anybody can create a bill. Me and you could sit down and write a bill right now about something, but we'd have to find a congressperson who was willing to sponsor the bill. And we've talked about this with the president. Remember, not even the president can go to Congress and submit a bill. It has to be a current congressman, but anybody can write up a bill. Okay, me and you, school board, interest groups, big business, anybody. Okay, but the problem is finding someone who will sponsor it. What's the source of bills? Well, almost anywhere or any problem can be the creation of bills, and a lot of those comes from me and you. Okay, our interests, what's concerning us. All right. Obviously, the White House and the president has an agenda they want to get pushed through, so they're going to create bills and find a congressman to submit those bills. Interest groups, they are a big source because they're experts on their topic, and so they're constantly looking to support bills, get bills written up. Alrighty. Big business is another one. They want things done for them. Regulations are deregulated. Able to do this, able to do that. There's all sorts of things that big business wants done. But yeah, bills can come from almost anywhere. Okay, but it's usually from some sort of problem or the pushing of an agenda. What happens to most bills? Well, most bills do die off early in the legislative process. We're going to get to this in just a few minutes, but every bill is introduced, okay, and then it's sent to a committee, and some bills will die in those committees, and that's what happens to a lot of them, okay. They go to the committee, and then nothing ever happens with them. It's not a bill, but President Obama's Supreme Court nomination, Merrick Garland, he went to committee, his name, and was supposed to go through the confirmation process, but the committee did nothing with him, okay, and his nomination just kind of died. Same thing happens to a lot of our bills. How can they kill a bill? Pigeonholing. That's where they set those bills aside and don't discuss it. This happens, when it's a Democratic bill in a Republican-controlled Congress, or vice versa. Whichever party is in control is going to be the ones who set the agenda, who have control of the committee, who are the leadership on the committee, so they get to make a lot of decisions. Okay, and they can, if they want to, just decide not to talk about a bill, and it will die in the committee because it has to get done. Something has to happen with it, or it dies, at the end of a session. So if they never talk about it, they never send it out of committee, then it dies there. The other thing is a poison pill. This is where you add something that you know is going to get a bill killed. So maybe it's the best bill in the world. Let's say it's an education bill. It's going to give all sorts of money to schools for resources, bigger classrooms, more teachers for smaller classes, just all kinds of things that are going to make education better probably. And then somebody wants to kill it because they hate education for some reason. And they want to add that they're going to spend $1 gazillion on, new nuclear weapons or trying to blow up the moon or something crazy like that. Alrighty, that's going to get killed, and it's going to kill the education, the main bill, with it also. That's a poison pill. How can legislators make a bill more appealing? There's two ways. There's riders and there's earmarks. Riders are just adding something to a bill that doesn't have much to do with it. Okay, but it's not like a poison pill, so don't get it confused. A poison pill is something that is bad. A rider is where you add something that's a positive to a bill. So you add something to this education bill, maybe for farmers. Okay, it's not going to really hurt anybody, and it's just going to help the farmer, so that looks good. Okay, earmarks is funding, so it kind of goes with pork barrel legislation. Earmarks is just funding set aside for a specific program. Okay, so maybe there's a program here in Gwinnett County. Rob Woodall, our representative, sets aside some money in a piece of legislation for a particular program. That can be considered earmark / pork barrel. It could also be something maybe not as local as that, but it can be nationwide also. But those make it more appealing. What is a Christmas tree bill? That is where just a ton of riders and earmarks and things are added to a bill, and they all have nothing to do with the bill, but they tend to make it look better. Okay, so they add a lot of things to a bill. So that education bill, all of a sudden we have farming stuff added, we have business stuff added, we have environmental stuff added to it, and it's nothing huge, but it makes the bill look a little bit better. But that's a Christmas tree bill. And here's a cartoon that shows you it's the only way the tree would fit in the newsstand. You see all the money that's added to this thing. Okay. Log rolling. Log rolling is pretty simple to understand. This is the favors that are done for each congressman, and this is really how things get done. Okay, because people will refuse to vote and for a certain bill, but then you go and say, hey, if you support me on this bill and vote yes, then I'll support you down the road on this bill. And so it's how things get done. It's the favors that are done for each other. It's I'll support this bill, you support this bill. I like this program. If you like this program, I'll like your program. It's the back scratching that gets done in Congress and gets things done. It could also be with the White House also. We talked about Lyndon Johnson and what he had to do to get the Civil Rights Act passed, working with the Republicans and getting some Republicans named to some executive agencies. Okay, but he got the 3 votes he needed to get the Civil Rights Act passed. All that plays into log rolling. So whenever you hear or see about favors, that's log rolling. All right, so let's go through the process of the bill. Okay, and I'm going to kind of move pretty quickly. Anyways, here we go. So the bill is introduced. Now, first up, a bill is going to go through the House and the Senate. It can be introduced on either side, except for revenue bills. Revenue bills only start on the House side. Okay, so a bill gets introduced on the House side, and it's given a name, H or HR1. If it's introduced on the Senate side, it's S or S1. Okay, so it's going to be given the letter and a number, and that becomes the name of the bill. Once it is read into the House or the Senate, it is then given to a committee. And we're going to talk about the permanent committees on Monday or so, but there's a bunch of them, and they get it, and then that's where all the work gets done, is within the committee. They can make changes to it. They can address all sorts of things in there. A bill can go into committee and then come out completely different. Okay. Now, if you see on there, there's introduced to a subcommittee. So you have the main committee. Well, sometimes those committees are 40, 50 people. You don't need 40, 50 people working on a bill, so they'll break off into a subcommittee. And this is really, really where a lot of the work's going to get done, where those people are going to tear it apart. They're going to do research and all that sort of stuff, bring in experts to testify on this stuff, and really drill down into this bill to make sure it's something that they want to submit to the full House or the full Senate. And here's the subcommittee stuff that we just said. Both sides do the same thing. They'll perform studies, hold hearings, make revisions. Okay, so that's really where the heavy lifting is done, is within the committee and the subcommittee. Okay, if the subcommittee votes on it and approves it on both sides, it then goes to the full committee, and the full committee can still make changes to it. So it can go into the committee and then go to subcommittee and get changed up, and then go to the full committee and get changed up again. All right, and then they'll vote on it, and you see on the House side, they will vote to send it to the House floor, to recommend it, or to kill it. Now, a bill doesn't necessarily have to make it out of there. We'll talk about this later. It can not really get a vote. Okay, it can just be brought out of committee and voted on without committee consent. We'll talk about that later. Okay. On the Senate side, same thing. They can change it, make changes, and then recommend it for approval, or they can kill it. All righty. Once it goes out of the full committee, on the House side, it goes to the Rules Committee. Now, this is the most important committee in all of Congress, so make special note of the Rules Committee. But they get to make all kinds of rules That's why they're the Rules Committee. As far as the bill goes, okay, they're going to set the debate agenda for it. They're going to put it on the schedule. They can do a lot of things. If they want to kill the bill still, even though they're not the committee that dealt with it and made changes to it, they can still kill it by not putting it onto the agenda. All right, so there's things that the Rules Committees can do to affect a bill. On the Senate has a system to where there's not a main leader. You have the majority and minority parties supposed to work together, and they will set up a schedule for the bill. Okay. On the House side, they have 1 hour to debate the issue. Just because there's so many people, there's no way they could possibly let 435 people speak on a bill. Okay, and then they'll have a vote, and if it passes, it goes to the Senate. Okay. On the Senate side, they have unlimited debate. And we'll get into a few things that they can do, like filibustering and that sort of stuff later on. But for this purpose, we're not going to worry about that. But they can debate it, and they'll have a vote. And once it's passed, it then goes to the House. Okay, so they will pass the bill, and then it goes to the other side, and they have to do the same. It goes back through the same process. We talked about how the legislative process is very slow. Okay, and this is why, because it passes on one side, but then it's got to go to the other side to get passed again. If it makes it to that far and the House passes a different version, then the Senate or the Senate passes a different version. So let's say it's money issue. The House says 10 million for spending. The Senate says 20 million. Then it goes to something called a conference committee, which we'll talk about later. But the conference committee is made up of both House and Senate members, and they will come together and they'll say, okay, let's just meet in the middle at 15 million. And then it goes back and it gets passed by the House and by the Senate. All right. Once it passes, both through the conference committee, it goes back to the full House. It goes back to the Senate. They vote on it. If they approve it at that point, then it goes to the president, who can do his thing, which is he can sign it into law. He can also veto it. Okay, we've already talked about the presidential action. We also know that Congress can override the veto through a 2/3 vote of both houses. It's a difficult process. That's a tough number to get. 2/3 of 535 is a lot of people. Okay, and it's not always easy to override a veto. When is it the easiest to override a veto? Well, when the president has low approval ratings. Okay, the question on on your PowerPoint says, when would Congress be least able to override a veto? When he has high approval ratings. We could say the reverse, and it's easier to override a veto when he has low approval ratings. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, right now, if the president vetoed something, it would probably be overridden just because of his approval ratings being down. All right, went a little bit longer than our previous ones of these, and I apologize for that. But I hope you all have a good evening, and I'll see you in class on Friday.